What's up, guys? I'd like to talk about a secret weapon that I use, or basically the way that I approach conversations that I anticipate conflict in, or conversations that you think could be about conflict, or addressing conflict in general. It's going to sound super simple, but today I had to approach someone who's really shown a lot of explosive behavior in the past and is someone that people don't really want to approach. But given a certain set of circumstances, it became necessary for me to have a conversation, figure out what's going on. And I figured, since I see this all the time, that people struggle to approach conversations like this, and I think part of that is not really knowing how, I'm going to give you guys the way that I open these conversations. It's a very simple tool. It allows you to open a conversation and you won't have to wonder what it is that you should say. And so I'm going to dive right into this. Super simple. Again, I just asked what's going on. And this is how I open a ton of different conversations, mostly conflict oriented, or if there's some tension. I know if somebody has some issues and they need to address them. And what this usually does, if I've timed it right, usually they'll dive right into whatever the issue is and what's been happening. If they don't dive right in, like sometimes they'll either play dumb or it's such a generic question they just don't really know what I'm talking about. Then I'll kind of add some details. Well, the other day this happened, or I know that you've been struggling with this, or you've kind of been doing this lately. These are the ways that I add the details. But then usually try to get into having a conversation about the specific behaviors that have prompted the conversation. Exactly like adding those details. It's, well, I know the other day we had this, or several people have been talking about this, or I witnessed, or I saw this happen. I heard this happen. These are the situations in which you're basically just framing in and understanding and highlighting the behaviors that really describe the situation you need to discuss further. And what you need to do is remain basically just as neutral as possible. This is just a discussion about what's going on, right? Just same way as you started and approaching it. And the biggest thing is, what you get to do is provide alternate viewpoints, primarily your own. But if you know other viewpoints, you can add those as well. And this is one of the gifts that you can always give, is perspective. You think of your own behavior sometimes and how you get so focused on the way that you see things and the story that you've told yourself. You kind of get stuck there. And what we need to do is help them unstick them from themselves, from the story they told themselves. So you just say, hey, this is what I see. This is how I've seen you act, and might be why that's happening. Or this is why I know some of these things are happening that are bothering you. A lot of times what we have is these situations play off of each other, and people tell themselves stories and they act based on emotion. And this can cause a lot of escalating conflict, right? It doesn't just stop because typically people won't address it, because conflict sucks, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, and people don't know how to address it. So by using this tool, you can open that conversation pretty harmlessly, typically speaking. And as long as you stay cool and allow their viewpoint to exist without just challenging it, you're just saying, hey, totally understand, this is how I see it. This is the way that you could see it. I'm not saying I know exactly what's happened, and the past is fixed. And whether they're right or wrong, we can move forward. Let's find the way to move forward. So frustration is a big thing that plays into conflict, right? We get frustrated, and typically people won't address those frustrations. They'll either bury them or they'll vent to other people. And this doesn't ever solve the problem. So use frustration as your signal that there is a problem to address. This is how you approach that conversation. And what you need to leave behind is any of the stories related to it. any of the stories you might have told yourself, or any stories anybody else has told you. The only way to get through something is by understanding the particular person's viewpoint that you might have some frustration with, or who you know is causing frustration. Frustration is just one primary emotion that I'm picking. It could be pretty much all sorts of bad emotions, negative emotions, but really what we're trying to do is approach any sort of conflict situation, any sort of conflict conversation in which we're trying to address some behavior that's saying, hey, something's wrong. So I use this all the time, all sorts of conversations. It cracks it wide open, typically speaking. If it doesn't crack it wide open, you can kind of work into it slowly by adding the details, as I said, and by at least, if they do not dive in ever, you can just share your perspective. Hey, this is what I'm seeing. I don't know what's going on, but this is what it looks like. This is what it seems like. So can you help me understand kind of what's going on? And typically speaking, if they deny, what you can do is highlight the difference between their normal behavior and the behavior you've been seeing. Say, hey, this is really unlike you. Like typically you're this kind of person. You're very calm, you work well with others, you have very open dialogue, or you're very pleasant, you normally greet people, yada, yada, yada. Whatever it might be that they normally do and that they're not doing. Just create this gap in understanding that says, this is what you normally act like, this is what you're acting like now, so it seems like something's wrong. So I'm just wondering what's going on, and if we could talk about it. Hopefully, equipped with this tool, you'll be better able to approach conversations that you probably don't want to, but ultimately you need to, because if you don't, these things will build and they'll grow and they'll escalate into something far worse. So I generally advise, you don't need to approach it immediately. You should approach it in a pretty timely fashion before it has a chance to grow into something worse. So I hope this helps. You can't lose if you don't quit.